Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be joined today by my good friend, Tim Galpin. Thanks for being with us, Tim.
Sure, Kathy, no problem.
Great. Before we jump into the conversation, let me first introduce you to Tim. Tim Galpin is a best-selling author, senior lecturer of strategy and innovation, and academic director of the MBA program at Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford. Now, you may have already just noticed that Tim is not British, so perhaps we'll hear today how he made his way to Oxford. Tim has over 3 decades of international professional experience as a management consultant and senior executive, combined with his academic experiences. Since 2005, Tim regularly consults with boards and senior management in various industries around the world. His clients have included numerous Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 companies, including Verizon, Harrods, UBS, Bank of America, and Cargill. Tim has authored 5 management books, which have been published in 5 languages, and is often featured in the media as a recognized expert on strategy formulation and execution, mergers and acquisition, workforce productivity improvement, organizational transformation, and culture change. Tim holds a PhD in organizational development from UCLA and is a former instructor of the National Outdoor Leadership School, also known as NOLS. So I'm really excited to be here today with Tim. And Tim, you have a really impressive career and one that has not been one note. And an aspect of your career that really interests me, if I'm remembering correctly, is that you had an early inspiration for how your career might play out. Can you share that story of what led you to teaching, getting a PhD, and how you thought you might manage your career over time?
Yeah, so, I really never thought I would be a professor growing up in upstate New York. I was the first one to go to school in my family, so I'm what they call first generation university. My parents never had a university degree, my older brother and sister. So I didn't really have a lot of guidance. I went to state school in New York State for my undergraduate. Really didn't really know what I wanted to major in. I wanted to go to university because that was the thing to do. And we lived on a fairly diverse street. There was a doctor up on the corner, a couple teachers. There was a mechanic that worked across the street. My dad worked at General Electric. And I saw my dad and the mechanic come home dirty every day from their work. And then the doctor and the teachers are kind of wearing nice clothes and look clean. And I thought, well, maybe I want to work with my brain rather than my hands. So I went to university, but without a lot of guidance, without a lot of knowledge of the requirements, that sort of thing. I was actually failing out my freshman year. And one of the professors I had taken took me under his wing. He saw that I was failing out and, they were going to send me home. But they put me on academic probation and said I could stay for one more year, but I had to get my grades up. And so the professor took me under his wing, really turned my life around. I took a few classes of his, ended up collecting different courses over the 4 years I was doing my undergrad, not in any one major. So I ended up as what they call a diversified or a liberal arts major. But it positioned me well for all kinds of different options in my career. I had a little bit of social sciences. I had some hard sciences. I had mathematics, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I thought, the person that turned my life around, he was a really good professor, became an inspiration for me. And I thought, I'd like to do what he does. So I asked him about becoming a professor, and he told me about the whole, master's and PhD thing. Did some research on that, did my master's right after my undergraduate, and then did my PhD at UCLA to finish up. So I went straight through undergrad, master's, PhD. And as I was graduating, finishing my dissertation, I started thinking, well, the best professors I had some work experience. So I thought I'd go out and get some work experience, be a better professor in the classroom because I could bring some of that work experience into my teaching. And I had my $1 billion of student loans, as many of us do in the US. especially after 10 years of university. So I thought, I'd pay off some student loans, make a bit of money, and come back. And I thought I'd do it for 3 or 4 years. Then I got sucked into, I started out at Hughes Aircraft. I was a project manager there, big aerospace engineering company, big bureaucratic environment. It was good to get that experience and knowledge about how big corporations work. But I knew I didn't want to do that my entire career. So a friend of mine at UCLA who was doing his MBA while I was doing my doctorate was out doing consulting for a little boutique firm out of Long Beach, California, doing retail operations, strategy, customer service improvement. And they had about 30 or 40 consultants in the US, and they had a project in London. And he called me and said, we're going to go do this project, him and another guy. We need a third guy. Do you want to go? And if we can sell business, we can start an office and start a business in London. I'd never been overseas. I didn't have a passport at the time. So, a month later, I had my passport, my bags were packed, and we were moving to London with a project, a mobile phone, and a flat. And so, we didn't know we had a 6-month project. I ended up there for almost 5 years. We sold that business to Arthur Andersen, lived in Germany with them for a year. Didn't like Arthur Andersen, so I left, came back to the States, worked for Booz Allen doing strategy for a couple of years. From there, I got headhunted, became the head of mergers and acquisitions globally for Watson Wyatt Worldwide, which is now Willis Towers Watson. From there, in 2001, I set up a business again on my own with a business partner of mine in Chicago, doing mergers and acquisitions consulting. Sold that in 2005, which freed me up to do what I'm doing now, is teaching. And I've never looked back. I really liked the professor thing. It took me longer to get into the academic environment or back into it than I thought it would. After I got sucked into the consulting, traveling the world, the money that goes with it. But now I like the lifestyle. My own bed got to be nicer in a hotel room. So I still consult on the side, as you mentioned. I started in 2005. I still consult, do 2, 3, 4 projects a year. Usually strategy, mergers and acquisitions work with the companies that you mentioned. Other companies worked in Newmont Mining acquisition last year, which was one of the biggest deals of the year last year. So, it keeps my feet wet in the real world and, helps me bring relevant information into the classroom. So
that's great. Thanks for that overview. I want to go back just a little bit. I'm curious, what made you decide to focus on organizational development as your focus area when you got your PhD?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, when I was looking at, what my background in education had provided me, so this liberal arts, like I mentioned, had all kinds of broad range of topics, subjects that I had studied at an undergrad. Master's level, I did a master's in management. So, it was basically how you analyze and run businesses, as, most masters in management are. And then I thought, when I was doing a PhD, I really didn't want to do a pure economics kind of PhD, because that's just a lot of economic analysis and, where the economy is going and try to predict all that. But I really thought, how do organizations improve, and how do you implement strategy? How do you make change happen? And organization development's all about that. It's kind of a mix of strategy, organization change, analytics, business psychology. So it kind of mixes a lot of different disciplines, like my undergraduate did. And so it was really interesting to me. I like diversity of thought. I like diversity of challenge, and organization development just was something that provided that to me.
Interesting. And then you said you jumped to the corporate world and then to consulting. I didn't realize your first gig in consulting, was starting the office, going to London, all of that. What can you say a little bit more about what attracted you to the consulting world and kept you in it for so long?
Yeah. So, when I moved to London, it was three of us doing this one project with a big retail company. And then we met the senior team at Harrods, and they liked us and hired us. And it was all about business improvement. We were helping them set their strategy. They wanted to improve customer service to get revenue up, serve customers better, streamline their operations to get costs down. So there was a strategy element to what we were doing, but there was really an execution element. So how do we, get the strategy implemented? And that was all about the people. We could do all the analytics we wanted and show how the strategy was going to improve revenue, reduce costs, streamline processes, all the process flows, all that analytical work. But at the end of the day, the people on the front line, the customer service people, the department managers, the store managers, they all had to get on board. So that was the psychological element, the behavioral element. And so I got to apply everything I was learning in my PhD program and my undergrad and master's, actually. So I was actually applying what I learned in university. But I was also learning what I was doing. So I learned what worked. I learned what didn't. I learned that, the theory says one thing, but the practice is really different sometimes, often. And, just the challenge of making change happen in an organization. As a consultant, you don't have any position power. So you have influence power. You influence the senior team. You influence middle management, influence employees. And I like that challenge of, seeing the actual implementation of what we were developing and designing on paper. And then changing projects. Even though I was actually Harrods was a client of mine for 3 years. We did 3 different projects. So each project's a bit different, a different focus. The players are different in each project. The outcomes and expectations are often changing. So you're always learning while you're doing. That's one thing I like about consulting. The challenge is always there because it's always a new project, often a new company. So besides Harrods, I worked with Galeries Lafayette over in Paris, KaDeWe in Germany, the Burton Group in the UK, Safeway UK, a bunch of others. So you're always changing companies. Even though the projects may be similar, the companies are different and the challenges are different. So, I love learning. Consulting is learning on steroids, and you get paid to do it, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Having other people pay for your learning, that's a good model. So I'm curious then
absolutely.
When did you? So I know you said you started get being in your own bed. But what was the trigger, or how did you really know when it was time for you to be okay, I'm ready to kind of put consulting aside for now. I'm ready to go ahead and move into teaching. What was kind of the signal for you?
Yeah, I'd always had an eye on it, right? Because that's what I originally did my PhD, to become a professor at some point. And so, I was doing a lot of presentations over the years, as a kind of global leader of a business. I was doing a lot of presentations around the world. My books, I would present on my books, content of my books. It was a marketing thing for the firm, but it was also, getting me out in front of the public to represent the firm, but also get my ideas across and that sort of thing that were in my books. And I had a lot of people that would come up to me afterwards and say, I see you have a PhD. I'm from the University of Michigan, or I'm at Stanford or wherever. And have you thought about teaching? And I said, yeah, but not right now. I was still enjoying consulting, enjoying the travel, that sort of stuff. And I also realized, though, I wasn't doing pure academic research. So I was writing some articles, I was writing books, but they were based on case examples and tools and templates I was building and using with my clients that worked. And there were some new tools and templates I had developed. And, we're getting traction in the marketplace. A couple of my books became bestsellers. So it was really something that when I sold that business in 2005, I was talking to couple firms about a partnership again. I was talking to another big firm actually over in the Middle East about becoming head of strategy. I went through their whole interview process, but I thought, do I really want to jump back on the treadmill? I made a bit of money from the sale of that little boutique firm that I was running with my business partner. I didn't really, my lifestyle, I didn't accumulate a lot of, debts that you have to worry about paying off. So, no debt is freedom often. And, I wasn't looking at paying for private schools for kids and, all that sort of stuff. So, I basically gave myself the option to change careers and dial back my lifestyle and income, significantly. And, money is a currency, but time is also a currency. And so, when I saw the time and flexibility that the academic lifestyle provided, that's been a currency that was really attractive. So I thought I'd try it for a year. I talked to the University of Dallas. I was living in Dallas at the time. And a friend of mine said, they like guys like you with, PhD with an academic credential, but with work experience. And there was an HBR article in 2005 called How Business Schools Lost Their Way, talking about how they became too academic and too research oriented, that they should have some professionals teaching. And the University of Dallas was actually mentioned in that article as having the right model. So there was a couple other schools mentioned as well. And so I met with the dean, and he said, yeah, we like people like you you've got the academic credential, you've done some writing, but not pure academic writing. And, so you're academically qualified, but you're also a practitioner. Do you want to start and work for us? And I said, sure, when? And he said, well, in 2 weeks. And I said, okay, sure. I just sold that business a month or two before. I was doing a little bit of consulting on my own for a company up in Silicon Valley. But that project was going to run out in about a month or so. And I said, sure, I'll be available. And so 2 weeks later, I started teaching. Thought I'd try it for a year or two, see how it went. It was a big MBA program at the University of Dallas, a lot of part-time students doing their MBA while they're working. So I really enjoyed it. They seemed to learn a lot, and I got good feedback. And I could still consult on the side because I had the flexibility in my schedule. Like I said, to keep my feet wet in the real world, little extra income, that kind of stuff. But I was doing it because I wanted to, not because I had to, and I could travel when I wanted, not because I had to travel. So it just, the lifestyle change and the currency of flexibility and time outweighed the monetary currency.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious how you didn't really talk about during the consulting years, it being a grind or you getting burnt out. And I think a lot of people, I know I've experienced this, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And the other thing that's interesting though, is then switching to teaching, being attracted to that kind of dialing back, having the flexibility of time. But I can imagine for a lot of people, there being a challenge in terms of a mental shift, or how does that feel to kind of step back, or to, even from an identity perspective, you're still a professor, you're still consulting on the side, but you're like, perhaps not doing the big M&A deals that you were doing, or like, so I'm curious how you manage that shift, or, I'll probably probe a little bit more on the kind of like just the avoiding burnout perhaps, and how you successfully did that. But
yeah, that's, something in consulting. There's two reasons people leave. One, three. You just underperform, right? You're not cut out for it. So you get coached out, or you realize it yourself and you leave. But really, the other ways are the burnout lifestyle. So the continuous travel, long hours, working into night, all night kind of stuff. So you got to be careful of that. But, that being said, it used to be the corporate guys stayed at home and the consultants traveled. But, because corporations have operations all over the world now, they're traveling as much as the consultants were. So it's hard to avoid travel these days, even in a corporate environment. And also, part of the burnout is not being able to have relationships. So when you travel so much, 5 days a week, 7 days a week sometimes, if you're staying at the client over the weekend to get important board meeting stuff together or whatever, Um, you, you don't get to, play in the softball league on a Tuesday night, and you don't get to, hug your kids all week if you have kids. If you got a wife or a girlfriend or a husband or boyfriend, whatever, you just don't get to see them only on the weekends. And some people are okay with that, but a lot of people, that doesn't work. So you got to understand what the lifestyle is. Whenever I tell somebody, that asks me about consulting, I say it's learning on steroids. You get paid well to learn. You're always challenged. It's intellectually stimulating. A lot of good things about it. But the downside is the lifestyle. At first, you're traveling the world on somebody else's money, and you go to some exciting places sometimes: New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, London, wherever. But other times you're going to, and no offense to Des Moines, Iowa, but I've spent 6 months in Des Moines, and it's okay, but it's certainly not New York or San Francisco, so or Hong Kong. So you often don't get to choose where you go, how long you stay there, and you're often just seeing a hotel room and an office and a taxi or a rental car back and forth. So it's not glamour travel often. So you got to understand what you're getting into. Focus on the learning part of it. What you're getting out of it, the psychic income from that intellectual stimulation keeps you from getting the burnout. But a lot of consultants will leave, go work for a client, so they don't have to travel as much. So yeah, you got to manage that burnout. That's really important. For me, it wasn't that big of an issue for a long time.
Right. And then, so once you did have this experience switching to teaching, you then pretty much stuck with that. And so you didn't necessarily go back. Did you get, once you started to experience having that additional time and the flexibility, did you get attracted to that, and that became something that became a motivator to stay on that track?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to change your lifestyle if you dial your income back, unless you cashed out in a big way. And, I had to make that mental adjustment to, it's a much slower pace. So I had to, slow my focus down. It's also, the lifestyle is a bit different. You got to manage your income a little bit differently than you do when you're making partner income in a consulting firm. Life changes as you get as you go through your career and you get a bit older and you age a bit. There's an old book called Half-Life. It essentially talks about you spend the first half of your life trying to make money, second half trying to make a difference. And that describes my career to a T. I spent that first half trying to make money, and the second half, trying to make a difference. This is my give back time in my career. I actually tell students about that at the beginning of every class. I have, my little PowerPoint slide that says Half-Life is the title of the slide. Tells a bit about my career and how I did that career flux. In 2005, got out of consulting and into academia. And I, described the half-life, and this is my give back time. And so, I get a lot of intellectual stimulation and challenge from the academic environment, and a lot of satisfaction, reward when, a student sends me an email, a month later after they graduate, or 3 years after they graduate, say, I'm still applying what I learned in your classes, or I got this job because of what you told us about how to do an interview, and, that sort of thing in a case, how to present well and all that. So, that's a reward. Sure, I got rewarded monetarily, but also my clients were successful at their mergers. So that was good to see them, get held up in the media as doing a great M&A because of the work I did. But I get just as much satisfaction when one of my students says, I really learned a lot and I'm applying it in my job, or I got promoted because of what, you taught me how to do a presentation to senior management, and, I got a promotion because of it. That's just as rewarding as, company X doing a great merger. Even more rewarding because, company X is going to make money anyway because they're so big. That's how they just by inertia, they'll continue to do well often.
Yeah, part of what you're describing, for me, I have a pillar of sustainable ambition I call right aspiration that talks about, or I think about it as both our satisfaction with work and our ambition can flex over time. It really can ebb and flow and change, and especially across the decades. And I kind of sense that that's part of what you're talking about. And I was curious if you could say a little bit more when you think about your own satisfaction and or ambition over these like periods of your career. How have you seen that arc kind of take shape?
Yeah, I mean, your priorities change, things change. You kind of been there, done that. So sometimes a little boredom might kick in. After you've done something, or after I've done something, kind of a 3 to 5 year cycle. I'm like, okay, I've learned what I can learn in that role or in that situation. So now it's time to change. To kind of to jumpstart my motivation again, and that's worked for me. Some people it lasts longer. My sister's the kind of 20, 30-year loyalist to a company. So we're very different in that way. But so it's different for each individual. If you are the kind of person that likes to learn, and that you got to set your life and your career up to be able to be flexible. You got to continually educate yourself, learn new material, techniques, whatever it might be. So that whole continuous learning. Don't get yourself locked in to a certain lifestyle that you can't get yourself out of. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd like to, start teaching or doing that." I was like, "Yeah," and friends of mine, I'm like, "Yeah, that's great, but it's going to take you a while to do a PhD if you want to become a professor, or even if you just want to, use your master's degree, you could still teach in a community college or whatever." But the income isn't going to be there because, they've got the kids in private school, the big houses, multiple houses, the cars, all that kind of stuff. So you got to set your life up to be flexible as well. And they set their life up to stay on that track, that treadmill, as I call it. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's where I think we need to shine a little bit of more of a light on that, just because I don't think people are often planning ahead or looking ahead. And just like you said, setting up their life so that they can have that flexibility later on. So I think it's really wise counsel. I'm curious, as you kind of look back at the arc of your career, Tim, if there's anything that surprises you, or like the biggest surprise you kind of had over the course of your career so far.
That's a good question. I would say, the biggest thing is there's no one key to success. There are always like these books that the key to success or this key to success, that article, will say something. It's different for different people. So it's a combination of different things. There's a little bit, luck is, what's the old saying? Luck is when opportunity and preparation meet. So, you prepare, you choose a path when you're, 18, 19, majoring in whatever you major in university, kind of sets you on a path. But I've also seen that there are people that change. I have physicians in my MBA program, musicians, all kinds of different people from around the world in the MBA program here at Oxford. And they're doing career changes. I've had neuroscientists that, don't want to do neurosurgery anymore, or neurosurgeons. And they, they're doing a business degree. So I'm like, okay, interesting. So the surprise is really the amount of opportunity out there that can come your way, but you also have to make your way. So you've got to kind of, meet the opportunity when it arises. So again, that's that continuous learning, keeping yourself open to ideas, the network you build, always trying to keep yourself current and read about trends in the news and different industries. And then being willing to take a risk, because, and try something, try it for a year, try it for 2. If you like it, great. If you don't, as long as it, doesn't kill you, you can go and go back to what you're doing before, try something else. So, but that's been my biggest surprise is and there's been studies on it too. It's not what you necessarily major in university. There's a lot of people doing stuff that don't even have university. Steve Jobs, Gates, Zuckerberg, they're all dropouts. So and they've done pretty well for themselves as dropouts. And I've known people that have trained for certain things and then decided to do something completely different. And so there's always options. That's been my biggest surprise. There's always an option. Yeah. It may not be an immediate option. It may take months. It may take a year or two or more, but there's always an option. So yeah.
I love that. And there's always possibility and different choices people can make or moves they can make. So that's great. I'm curious, you mentioned your role at Oxford, and you've mentioned that it's like your dream job. And so what do you think about being in that role now at this stage in your career and having landed that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little dumb luck, foresight, serendipity, all kind of came together at the right time. It was, like I said, that kind of laying of the groundwork, doing my PhD early in my career, writing a few articles, then putting out some books, doing my speaking, the consulting. It all kind of came together. I started out at University of Dallas, not a super highly ranked school, decent school. It was okay. Went to Colorado State, taught there for 4 years. And then Oxford came along, and I fit the profile of what they were looking for at that time. They call me the experiment because I'm not, I am a full faculty member. I run the MBA program, but I'm not a full research professor. That's not the stage of my career I was at. I told them, I'm what they call clinical in the US. Clinical professor is there for teaching and not research. There's only a few at different schools. Some schools don't even hire clinicals. So I'm the first one they've tried at Oxford, and it seemed to work. And so, it's a super brand, as we know. So I like the diversity we have here. That's a great thing. We have, in our MBA program, over 60 countries represented from around the world. Obviously, multiple languages, multiple viewpoints, multiple industries. It's academic Disneyland. 79 Nobel Prize winners at the university or over the years. So every conversation you have keeps you on your toes. You're not having a dull conversation, pretty much anyone. Whether it's student or faculty. And, so I'm always learning on steroids again, like consulting was. From my background, my history, as I mentioned, I was first generation. There's very few of us here at Oxford, even in the student ranks. So I actually mentor a student who's first generation. His father was a taxi driver near Birmingham, and he's, presented to the UN and that sort of thing now. So as an undergrad, so I'm really proud of what he's doing because I can see myself in him. I see myself, 30 years ago. And so, yeah, there's kind of a spiritual element to it. My grandparents moved to America with no money in their pocket, the whole immigrant thing. I came back they moved from England, actually. My mother's parents moved from Italy, so I'm half Italian, half English, but they moved from, very low income, very, low paying jobs. My grandfather worked in a pub when he was a teenager and moved to America. And 2 generations later, I get to be an Oxford professor. So, yeah, that's the way it works
remarkable. Out. Yeah, yeah. Well, I know you often get teaching awards. And, you talked about the fact that you have your work experience, your consulting experience working with businesses, and you're able to bring that into the classroom. And you are a wonderful mentor to a lot of students. So I'm curious if I can pick your brain a little bit and ask you, when you think about advice you might give to people, say in their 20s or 30s or 40s, those different stages of their career, what advice might you share?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is, always be curious, right? And you hear that a lot, always be curious. But some people say, oh, I'm curious. And I'm like, I don't know. I've seen you in class. You don't ask a lot of questions, that kind of stuff. Maybe they are, but they aren't outwardly curious. So, but just be a sponge for learning. in all kinds of different ways. Read the news, read some articles, talk to people, always be learning, ask questions rather than, we all know these people, the EOEs, the experts on everything. They have an opinion on this and they know that. I like people to ask questions more than have answers because they're the interesting ones, right? They're the ones that are stimulate. And if you ask the right question, you stimulate all kinds of good answers just by asking the right question. And that's how I teach, right? I ask a bunch of questions. I don't stand up and lecture and give a bunch of answers. And students give me that feedback. They're like, I like that you ask us questions and we have to think for ourselves and we learn from each other. You give your opinion, as part of the discussion, but really you just ask a bunch of really good questions about whatever topic it is. And so ask questions, be curious. Don't lock yourself into a lifestyle I mentioned earlier. And then do what you love and the money will follow. That's another old book that's been around for a long time. And what you love may change. Like for me, it changes every, few years, 5 years. When I say, from a company to an industry, consulting to academia. So, if you're doing what you really enjoy, you're going to be better at it. You put more time into it. You put more energy into it. You're just going to be more motivated by it. So, and that will show in your performance. And then, the last piece of advice is the old PIE model. It's an old book, the PIE career model, performance, image, and exposure. And the research in the book talks about, really about 10% of your career success is performance. There's a lot of good people out there. When I got out there, I saw people from MIT and Stanford that were doing spreadsheets that I would never even think of doing, the macros they were writing and things. I was like, okay, I'm never going to quant those people. They were just quantitatively better than I was ever going to be. One, they had a much deeper interest in it. And two, they were just really good at it. And I thought, well, okay, we'd work all night on the quant stuff, doing the spreadsheets and all that and the analytics. Then somebody would have to present it. And they're like, oh, Tim, you can present it because you're good at presenting. I was like, okay, now I found my niche, right? I understand the quant stuff, but I can communicate it better than they can because they just didn't like it. That wasn't their skill set. It's helped me in my teaching, obviously, getting up in front of a group. So, find what you're really good at. And if you're really good at quant, great. And if you're really good at presenting, great. So yeah, just that whole idea, the image and exposure, get yourself out. Because as you go up the pyramid, most of the pyramid, that bottom, entry level is all about typically technical skill, entry level stuff. And there's a lot of good people that come out of good universities, good training programs, whatever it might be. And they're going to be able to do, whatever technical skill they're being hired for. There'll be 100 good engineers or 100 good marketers or 100 good, scientists, whatever it might be. But, at some point, they're going to look for somebody to promote to manage that 100 engineers, scientists, marketers. And, that is a different skill set than doing the science or doing the engineering. It's leading those engineers. It's problem solving, decision making, communication, coaching. So as you go up the pyramid, the skill set requirement changes. And so you got to work on those leadership skills because the quant and the technical skills will get you the entry level into the game. But to get, to the top of the pyramid, it's about communication, decision making, motivation, coaching, your network. So that image and that exposure that you build really gets you to the tip of the pyramid in the C-suite, as they call it. The chief, the CFO, the CIO, head of HR, head of operations, marketing, whatever. And so, yeah, work on more than just your technical skill. Being good technically, it's solid, but, that's not going to get you to the tip of the pyramid typically.
That's great. All great advice. I mean, frankly, all throughout this conversation. So one of the things I see too, in what you've been sharing is focus on learning. So that's one key takeaway that I think listeners can really think about applying and bring in, and that links back to the curiosity that you mentioned. So we're starting to get close on time. So I want to close out with a few, what I call rapid fire questions. I'll try not to respond and in between, other than with acknowledgement. But the first one is, how do you define success for yourself?
For me, it's learning. It always has been. People ask that in an interview, and I'll tell them, look, I'm here to learn. I want to learn. As long as I'm learning, doing interesting work, and adding value to the organization, if I get paid well to do that, the money will follow, but I'm not here for the money. Of course, I'm not going to do it for free, but, I'm here to learn and add value. So I'll get something out of it. I'll learn. You'll get something out of it. I'll add value, hopefully a lot of value. And then, the money will take care of itself, and we can talk about that later.
What's the best career advice you ever received?
Yeah, I think it was, this idea of do what you love and the money will follow. It's a trite phrase, but there's a lot behind it. So I just find I'm more motivated when I'm doing stuff I like to do. And when I get either bored of it or don't like it anymore, either because of the people or the environment or whatever has changed, or I've just done it long enough to where I'm, learn what I can learn, that it's time for a change. So, and then I'll find something else that I love, and the money will follow from there. So it's all about, doing what you love. And not everything's, going to be roses and perfect, right? Everything has warts. So when I say, do what you love, that's why they call it work. You get paid to do it, right? So, but focus on the good things, focus on the learning, focus on, whatever you're getting out of it. And yeah, that's what I would say.
What's the best life advice you ever received?
Nothing lasts forever. I learned that a long time ago. You lose family members. Nobody's around forever, including ourselves. So, you got to enjoy the time with the people that you care about, family, friends. That's why I've stayed in touch with, obviously, Jess and yourself for many years, because, just important people in my life and my family. And I know I'm not around forever. So, you got to enjoy every minute.
How do you like to take a break or pause?
That changes. It depends. Staying physically healthy is a good thing. So doing my exercise, because that relates to mental as well. I'm mentally sharper when I stay physically fit. So that's always been important to me. So going out for a run, doing, an exercise routine, just to, kind of get your head straight and your body fit. So that's always been big for me. Spending time with friends, family, the people I want to spend time with. Again, I like learning. So, the movies I watch or a television series or whatever, or something I read, there's always got to be some sort of educational element to it, like a historical thing, even if it's a drama, some scientific angle on it, sci-fi, whatever it might be. Cause, I feel like I'm learning even though I'm vegging out a bit. So, yeah.
That's great. What's your best time saving or productivity tip?
Take advantage of the technology available to us. The smartphones and the laptops are awesome, but they do extend the day, so to 24/7. So you got to set aside time to just get away from them. And there's certain things you need to be detail oriented about, but most of it you don't need to worry about the details. They'll take care of themselves. But you got to understand the things that need the detail focus. And then the rest of it, I think too many people try to get, into the detail, the weeds of pretty much everything. And then before you know it, their time is gone. So they can't figure out where did all their time go on. Well, you're focused on the detail of everything. You got to have priorities, basically. Prioritize.
And pull up, I'm hearing you say. Yeah. Final question is just, what's one thing you can't live without?
Besides oxygen, learning. That's been the theme of my discussion, obviously. Yeah, when I'm not learning, I feel like I'm dying. So it's time to relive again, regenerate my life, and start learning.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Well, Tim, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much. As you know, I can always talk to you for a lot longer, and I probably kept you longer than I anticipated, but we're out of time. So thank you again for being with me today. I really appreciate it and sharing all of your wisdom with me and my listeners. Thank you so much.
Anytime, and good luck with the video series. And I'm sure I'll be speaking with you and Jess soon.
Yes, thank you. Find more inspiring interviews and get show notes for this episode at sustainableambition.com/podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode or my insider tips, guides, and tools by signing up for Sustainable Ambition Forum, my twice monthly newsletter. Sign up at sustainableambition.com/subscribe. Thanks again for joining me. Speak with you next time.